You ready?
Yes.
Okay. So hello everyone. Today we are pleased to have Ryan Staub, our operation manager from our petroleum testing services lab, and he's here today to share with us about chemical laboratory technologist career, as well as answer some questions related to hiring process. So you want to introduce yourself a bit first?
Thank you, V. I'm Ryan Staub. I am the operations manager for AGAT Laboratories Petroleum Testing Services Division. I've been with the company for about 11 years now, and I have a bachelor's degree in chemistry that I got from the University of Calgary. I've worked my way through a few of the buildings. I started out as a lab technician in the environmental section, and I joined the petroleum section as a quality assurance person, and I did the lab management, and now I've moved into operations management.
Thank you so much. So we may move to the first question right now.
Yep.
So as a hiring manager, what are the key skills and attributes that you would expect from, and some advice to improve for new graduates?
When I'm looking at resumes, one of the biggest things I will look for is the attitude that's coming across, especially in the interview. I can generally pretty easily tell if someone is really actively engaged in chemistry and they want this as a career. And that's one thing you have to know, especially when you're a younger person coming straight out of school, is that this isn't a job for most people, this is a career for most people. So I'm looking for a really serious attitude, a positive attitude, and something that tells me you're actually interested in chemistry, that you want to be working in a chemical laboratory, doing analytical services and things like that. I don't want someone who's just thinking that this is going to be a 9-to-5 job, punch a clock, and leave for the day. There's a lot that goes into this job other than just running your instrument and running your tests. It's learning, and it's actively being engaged in the chemistry industry and going above and beyond and learning about things on your own time and actually being interested in the chemistry. Problem solving skills. A lot of this is going to be documented standard operating procedures, but it's not going to be something where you're just going to press a button and you're going to get a result and then you're going to report that result. You're going to often have to diagnose an instrument. You're going to have to look at a quality control sample and see why it fails. In school, you might have a sample they tell you to do and expect a result from it. Well, we have a similar thing. You run that result and you don't get the result expected. I don't expect you to just keep running that result until you have the expected result. It's something where you're going to have to understand your instrument. You're going to have to diagnose when something's going wrong. You're going to have to spend your time learning about what you're doing rather than just rote memorization. It's like when you go into one of your labs, you know the instructions, but you might not understand the instructions, and that's okay. When you're doing something one time, when you're doing something 1,000 times in a lab, I have the expectation that you're going to understand what you're doing, and that's what I'm going to look for. And I might even ask questions in an interview that would be related to your degree, something that you might have learned, some instrument you might have worked with in school, and I say, hey, it didn't work properly, what are you going to do? I was like, well, I put my hand up and I asked my TA what to do. It's like, did you try to understand what was going on? Did you try to understand why it was failing? And it kind of rolls into the next thing I'm looking for, and that's a willingness to learn. What are you doing to expand your own knowledge base? So you graduated, say, a year ago, and you come to me with a resume that says I am a chemical technologist from state and I graduated a year ago and I'm looking for a job, and I'm going to ask you, what were you doing for the last year to keep your skills sharp? What were you doing for the last year to improve your resume? Did you read any articles? Did you learn more about instruments? Have you been actively engaged in continuing your journey through chemistry? Or have you just been sitting around sending out resumes and you might have forgotten a lot of what you learned in the past year? So generally when I'm interviewing someone, you should expect questions about degree, or like more open-ended questions. I'm looking more about how the way you think rather than what you remember. It's not a quiz in that I'm looking for a singular answer. I'm looking to see how you approach a problem. So I might give you a hypothetical scenario where I want you to work through it, and I want to see if you're detail oriented, if you would ask questions at some process, if you draw on previous knowledge from what you had. So most interviews that I run are going to be very similar to that, and I'm really more trying to get a feel for you as a person because the resume already told me your degree and what you did for the last few years. I'm now looking to tell you if you're going to be a good fit on the team, or if I think you're going to be a positive addition to the team more than anything.
So the whole point is they need to show how genuine they are, rather than just
A lot of it is that, and it's really just a matter of, like, if you don't want to be here, I'm going to be able to tell very, very quickly. And we've had a couple of SAIT graduates who had been out of it for a few years, and they come back and they just decide, maybe this is not for me. Maybe I don't enjoy working in the lab. And it's happened before, and I kind of know what to look for now in a person who's really been out of it for a long time, who maybe spent a few extra years trying to get a 2-year degree. It's like, do you really, really want to be here? And it can't, someone who's working in this sort of environment can't be someone who just kind of doesn't care, because it's not McDonald's where the worst thing that had happened is a hamburger gets burned. You're generally working with instruments that cost $200,000-$300,000, and oops, I wasn't paying attention can mean I have a $20,000 repair bill now. And one of those happening is okay. It happening again because you just don't care, you won't last very long on something like that.
So from your opinion, what personality may or may not be suitable for being as a lab tech?
I think one of the key things is that you have to be able to handle the monotony of the position. It can be boring, it can be repetitive. You never know what your day is going to look like, and sometimes based on like just how the lab runs, some days you're doing really exciting things, learning new instruments and really working on a project, and other days you might have 300 dilutions to do by lunch. And you need to be able to sit there and do those dilutions and do them the same way every single time. And it's monotonous and it's boring, but that's a big part of the job. Like, you have to do that. And when it comes to the next day, you've diluted your 300 samples and say you ran them all on the instrument. Well, the next day is you waiting for them all to be done on the instrument. So you might go from a day that's monotonous but busy to a day where you have absolutely nothing to do. And that is where I'm looking for someone with a lot of drive, and like a lot of personal drive, where they've decided, I've got nothing to do, but I'm going to improve my skills, or I'm going to learn this new method, or I'm going to talk to the senior technician and I'm going to learn what they're doing, or I'm going to ask to help another station, or I'm going to ask my manager what I can do that day. I want to see someone who's going to have that sort of attitude, rather than someone who's going to be like, oh, cool, I'm going to be able to play on my phone all day today while I wait for 300 results to finish. That's hard to find in a lot of people. I know a lot of people, like, you can chat a little bit and it's fine, but it's like, when we do have days where there's nothing to do, what will you do with your time? Will you go above and beyond what your daily task list is? And that's a lot of times when we phrase a posting on the internet, it's like, you'll do essentially whatever your manager asks you to do. And a lot of what the manager asks you to do is just continue to improve yourself, like make yourself more valuable to the company. No one is ever going to say no when you say, hey, I want to learn this or I want to learn that. The first thing they're going to ask is, like, are you done on your station? It's like, yes, okay. That's usually the way those conversations go. We're happy to always instigate the training, but you can only instigate the training a few times before you realize, I'm constantly having to instigate it. This person never comes to me and says, I want to learn something. It's always me going to them saying, I want you to learn this, I want you to learn that. A few years in the division, you should be able to fully round out your skills and be able to do everything. If you're still 2 years into your role and you're doing the same thing you started on, you should ask yourself, was that my fault, or am I being pigeonholed into a particular role? And especially for a division like ours, where it's very unique and there's a lot to do and there's a lot of crossover between lab stations, it's like, if you don't want to learn something, you don't have to, because you'll always be busy, but you'll provide more growth to your own career potential if you do want to do extra things. And probably the worst, like the absolute can't have it trait, is if you can't follow instructions. So all of our SOPs, our standard operating procedures, are developed over years or decades. So the last thing we ever want to see is you deviating from them. It's not like a lab where it's given, like, really general instructions on how to do something. It's like, go set up the reflux. It's no, you set up it exactly like this, and you have those exact settings, and you do it exactly this way for that precise and accurate result that we always want to seek. As soon as you start deviating or cutting corners or doing things like that, if like that's the type of person you are, that's a death sentence in the lab. Like, you absolutely can't have that kind of mindset where I can kind of do it my way. There's only one way, and it's the right way, and it's the way that's documented. And when you stop using the documentation and doing your own thing, you can't repeat your results. And it's one of those things where if you have trouble following instructions, it's going to be really apparent really quickly, and you'll never kind of get past the stage where you need supervision. And if they can't trust you to work alone, you won't last very long in the job. So, I mean, you can be driven, but if you don't follow instructions, that drive is going to be worthless. So it's a double-edged sword. You want to keep going and keep expanding your skills, but you have to remember these skills are tightly regulated in an industry like ours. You have to do something a very particular way, and it's very rare that you get to sort of deviate it. There are projects where you kind of get to spread your wings and do it your own way, but at the heart of it, like being a laboratory technician, it means following instructions. So if you have trouble with that, you're going to have a lot of trouble in this sort of career.
Thank you. Our next question for you is like, what position do you think new graduates are suitable for applying?
Really, like, especially when I graduated, a lot of the problems are going to be that you have no experience.
Right.
Like, your experience is just, I've got my state tech degree, and a lot of times you might be 20 years old just coming out of it.
Right.
It's going to be tough. The industry is really tough right now. The jobs are hard to come by. And I would generally suggest, if it says chemistry in its name, apply for it. There's very little out there that's going to require, from a lab technician standpoint, a lot of experience. If it says lab technician, you're working in a lab, vast majority of companies will train you up. They're just looking for those soft skills that I talked about, the ability to be driven, problem-solving skills, applying yourself, like showing that you're really interested in the industry. So if a job says, 2 years of experience are required, apply for it anyways. If it says that all you need is a state chem degree or chemistry degree, or if it says only chemistry degree, apply for it. At the end of the day, there's a lot of companies out there, Bureau Veritas, Access not around anymore, AGAT, Kaizen, ALS, they all essentially do very, very similar things. So there's probably, a few hundred entry-level jobs available in just Calgary alone where they're looking at, basic prep labs, or maybe it's logistics, maybe it's shipping. Get into the company first, even if it's not exactly what you wanted, because there's always a preference to hire inside. So a lot of jobs that have existed, like yourself, you're not even working the regular job that you got hired to do. You've moved into a completely different division that had an opening that we never advertised. So just working for that company, seeing internal postings, you can see what's available. Once you're in a company, that's half the work. So if you're saying, I'm just working logistics, but I really want to be in the lab, well, as soon as a lab opening comes up, guess who knows people at the company, knows management, has worked with people, understands the culture of the company. Yeah. You have a really easy into that company. And I know a lot of friends who started off in the industry when it was a downturn. I started during a downturn. I accepted a 3-month contract just to get experience. And the 3-month contract turned into a 6-month contract, turned into a 1-year contract, turned into a full-time job offering, and then more instrumentation and things like that. So I just applied. I applied to absolutely everything that said. I went to Indeed, I typed chemistry, Calgary, and I applied to anything I found. And I've applied repeatedly to things I found. It's not a simple or easy task, and realistically, just sending your resume out there doesn't always accomplish things. Ask, your friends and people who you graduated with where they're working. If there's an opening, you hand resumes to me of people and they're going to be looked at with a little bit more scrutiny than someone who just randomly applied to something. But the only kind of caveat I would say is if there's some really big, it's a lab manager position, and you have no management experience and you haven't been working in the industry long enough, don't do stuff like that. It's very obvious that you wouldn't be appropriate for a lab manager position, but if it's a lab position outside of some things where it says I need 10 years of experience running a specialty piece of equipment and that's all I'm looking for, if they're looking for entry-level lab people, you don't need experience for something like that. It will be something where the hiring manager, you never know what they're looking for. They might be advertising for one position, you apply to it, and they look at the resume really quickly and they see, well, this person might actually be good for something else. Or I might actually have an opening coming up, or someone's retiring coming up, and you're thinking, this person might be appropriate. So, if your resume's out there, it's making it onto the desk of hiring managers, you at least have an opportunity to be in their thoughts and make your way into a role that might not necessarily be what you wanted originally, but you can become sort of what you wanted. I would say, especially in an industry like now that's being hurt by, oil prices and COVID-19,
Right.
apply for anything, get some experience, and just get a connection to the company. Like, even if it's a short-term contract, which you'll see a lot in the environmental divisions when the busy season kind of comes up for them or spill season comes up, take a 3-month contract, just get experience. If you've worked for a company before, it's more likely that you're going to get hired to that company again. So take literally anything unless it's very clearly apparent that you're vastly underqualified for it. And usually I say quality assurance is a good starting point, logistics is a good starting point, shipping, receiving, pretty much anything that is involved with that company that you're interested in. Know about them, know kind of what they're into, and just get affiliated with them. There's a lot of people who've started in completely different divisions, like client project management, they've moved into the lab, or lab, they've moved into management, shippers, they moved into the lab. It's very, very possible.
So the important thing is just try to get experience first. And
Yes,
yeah.
that's the absolute must. Is like, even, well, I guess it's for your next question, but even if you have no experience at all, just having a job also helps a lot. Like, even if it's not a chemistry job, like you're working at Dairy Queen or something like that, just that I know you can hold down a job, I'm much more comfortable hiring somebody who's had job experience, life experience, than someone who has absolutely nothing on their resume but a high school degree and a, say, chem degree.
Yeah. As for the last question, I think you kind of mentioned it in the previous question already, but can you just let the own chemical lab student know what key point that you may seek out from their resume, especially when they like freshly graduate, no experience? Yeah.
One of the things that even if you don't have a lot of experience, you can still have a professional looking resume. I've seen a lot of really, really bad resumes, and I'll be honest, I will toss out a bad resume. Like, I won't even generally read it past, a couple spelling mistakes, or someone's got it formatted extremely poorly. I believe SAIT has career services.
Yeah, we do have.
Make use of it. Go to them with a resume, have them help you build something that's a little bit more eye-catching. I mean, don't go crazy with it. There's very simple formats that are available for free on the internet that would be fantastic. I think your career services wouldn't steer you wrong. Don't put your picture on it. Don't use crazy fonts. Don't use a lot of colors. Save it as a PDF. Have it be only one page. That's one of the key things I'm looking for. If someone sent me a 3-page resume, again, I would probably throw it away. Yeah, I'm looking for a lab technician, not someone who's going for their PhD degree. You don't have to tell me about every research article you've read. Just make it professional, make it succinct, and just kind of highlight the key areas. There's a million things that you can do wrong on a resume, but it's very, very easy to just make a nice, basic, simple resume. Don't try and fluff it out. Just hit the key points and make yourself. You're selling yourself. And your resume is like the way you're framing yourself. So if the way you frame yourself looks bad, I'm going to think you look bad. So take like 5 minutes, take an hour, go to career services, have them help you kind of customize it and write it in just a professional way. Like, even if it looks like every other resume I receive, I would rather that than something that looks unique. Whoever anyone tells you to make a unique looking resume or a unique presentation, they're 100% wrong. We go through hundreds of resumes when we're looking for somebody, and I don't want to see someone who has gone crazy with it and just the style and the formatting and stuff like that, because it just takes me longer to look for the pertinent information, and again, it probably will just go to the back of the pile. Most prominent thing should probably be that you're a SAIT grad, when you graduated, and your work experience, and what like kind of key skills you have. So kind of focus on those 3 big things. I don't care about your GPA. I've seen it a million times. People put their GPA in there as a highlight or just because they're proud of it. I don't care, and probably no one will care outside of your professors once you've graduated from your classes. I assume since you graduated that you're competent. I don't need to know if it was a 2.7, you just barely squeaked by, or it was a 4.0 and you're perfect. I just want to know that you graduated. So if it's on there, I'm generally not going to care in most cases. So don't generally include it. I'd like to see another job on there, even if it's completely unrelated to chemistry, just so that I know you have a professional experience. So you know what the kind of requirements are, showing up on time, keeping up with your team members, actually performing the tasks that your job required. If I don't see even a job on there, I get a little bit worried that you're not going to be able to kind of fit in with a crowd that's used to working 9 hours a day, 5 days a week. You're going to be taking time off because you're just not used to it, or you can't keep up with the staff. So having another job in there shows me that you're at least able to hold down another job, and I'm not going to be worried you're going to last 3 weeks and you're out of there. Instrument experience is really good. Highlight the instruments that you've worked with in school. Even if you only spent like a day or two with them, highlight that you've touched them, you've run samples on them, you know the general principle of how they're working. pH units, ICPs, GCs, anything that you can highlight, brand names, the instrument itself. That should be a big focus of, if you need to pad out the resume, you don't have a lot to talk about, put every instrument you've literally worked with under the sun, and a lot of it's going to match up to what we have in the lab itself, and it's going to help me decide that this person who's got all this instrument experience versus this person who's mentioned nothing. Maybe this person, I'm just going to assume you've only done manual titrations and that was your whole, whereas this person did gas chromatography, he's worked with this, he's worked with that. I'm going to obviously choose the person who's listed out that he's at least familiar with these units, because they'll probably have gone through the same things that I would go through the first few days, and so I can skip that, and I know you're a little bit more experienced. This should come from career services as well. Like, you don't write lists of accomplishments and what you've actually gotten out of your degree. Like, when you can't really write a whole lot about what you've done with your life because you're still young, you don't have a lot of experience in the industry, write what you learned from school. Don't write that I graduated from Chemtech, I graduated from individual courses where I learned this, or this is the responsibility I had and this is what I was doing. Soft skills from other jobs where I'm used to time management, or I'm very organized and I organize this whole, like, speak of specific incidences where you've done something or accomplished something. Don't say I'm organized. Say I was responsible for organizing the lab and I put everything back together, and that shows me how you applied organization. I don't want to see just a list of generic character traits, because anyone can write character traits. Give me an example of how you applied these soft skills to, or how you would apply it to the job. Sell yourself to me by saying I'm very punctual, I'm very good with time management, I'm available, I can stay late, it's no problem. That's the kind of thing where I want to see that you have thought through the resume and you've tailored it to my particular job. I can tell when you've sent out 1 million resumes. I can tell that this is obviously a generic job, like, especially when you do cover letters. Not always necessary, but it's a nice way to sell yourself as, an introduction. Like, a lot of times I will read them if I'm interested in the resume, just to see how that person presents themselves, how they sell themselves, and that's what the cover letter is. I know a lot of people don't like writing them, and it's not a requirement to apply to things, but it shows me you care enough about the job that you wrote the cover letter. But when I catch things like, oh, you wrote the wrong lab name in there, so you're just copy and pasting lab names and changing it for each one, that's the professionalism that I want to look for. Have someone else proofread your thing, but point out things about my company that I know you've gone to the webpage and you've looked into us a little bit more, and you've highlighted things that we do that you could sell yourself on. So it helps generally kind of make your resume pop a little bit more. And there's only so many companies that you can really apply to if you're interested in doing a lab technician job. So it doesn't take a whole lot of extra time to kind of push through, do a little bit of research on the company, and you can guarantee if you actually get an interview, I'm going to expect that you know about the company. Probably my first question is like, so what do you know about the company? And if you tell me, I don't know anything about the company, I'm going to assume that you just don't care. Because one of the first things, it's the easiest test in the world. Go to the webpage, read about us, learn a little bit about the company that you can just drop a few facts on. And I'm generally just going to move on to the next tech question. And it shows me you spent the 5 minutes required to learn a little bit about us to be a professional in the interview. So it's like you've presented a really professional resume. Don't come and act unprofessional. Don't have to wear a 3-piece suit while you're interviewing with us. But you should come in being prepared for our questions, have your resume ready, have your reference list ready. If we've asked you to fill out a application with all the questions filled in, like, have all that ready. It's a test. So if you come in the wrong time, or you didn't bring the references, or you didn't fill in your application, I'm going to assume you can't follow instructions. Think about every step of the way. Whatever we're asking you to do is a test, and if you don't get past the very first point where, I didn't remember to fill out my application, you've probably already failed. So as much as they might like you, as much as you might shine in an interview, passing very simple things like that might turn the interviewer off of you almost immediately, and you might get a very disinterested 10-minute interview instead of a customary 30 to 40-minute interview where there's a lot of back and forth between the two of you. So there's generally a lot more people applying than we would ever need. So you're generally going to be competing against, especially if we're hiring like after a big graduation year or something like that. So you can assume you're competing against all your friends. So if you don't pass the very basic stuff to get to the point where you're going to be in consideration for the job, I mean, you go from a chance of, I have 80% chance of getting this job to a less than 10% chance of getting that job just because you followed or you didn't follow one small instruction. So it's not a fair thing that we do, but if you're a hiring manager, there's just so many people that you have to go through. You need someone almost immediately, so you're going to try and go through it as fast as possible and hope that you gave a fair chance to everybody. But unfortunately, there's little things that we do to speed along the process. It's generally not the easiest thing in the world to find new hires, and a lot of people at this company will stay at this company for 20, 30 years. Like I said, I've been here for 11 years. I have a lot of people under my divisions that have been here for 30 plus years. So we're trying to get that kind of person. We're trying to get that person we know who's going to stick around and actually be a part of a team for a really long time. And a lot of it's just how well you interact with the person managing you. If you're really nervous, practice interviewing with your friends, your family. Try and get out of that shell, because if you don't have any practice doing these things, like, you got to sell yourself as a person. If you're nervous and you have trouble speaking or answering questions like this, prepare before you do the interview. I mean, I'm not going to judge someone because they're nervous in an interview, but am I going to choose the two equally competent people? One wasn't nervous and the other one was really nervous and came off poorly in the interview. I'm going to choose the person who kind of related a little bit better. So again, I'm pretty sure Career Services offers a lot of these things. They can do mock interviews for you, do them with your friends. There's really no right way to really interview somebody. So a lot of them are going to be, you can't really prepare for things like that. You can look on Google for common questions, but I would tell you for my particular style is I'm very heavy on just you talking about yourself, getting some background on your particular accomplishments, your life, how you're intending to fit in with the company. Almost all my questions will be open-ended, and I'm just looking for how you're going to think. There's no way to prepare for questions like that. It's going to be you, yourself, how comfortable you are with the degree. I'm not going to ask you to do some quick stoichiometric reactions on some paper and give you 5 minutes and come back and start quizzing you on chemistry. I'm really going to be looking at how you would think to a solution. I might give you the answer itself, but I want to think backwards for how you would have figured it out. I'm just trying to see how your brain works. And at the end of the day, I'm just trying to get a good feel for you as a person. So you're not interviewing for a lawyer position or a bank position. It's a pretty casual atmosphere in most labs. I mean, we're very serious, but it's still, we're approaching it casually. I want you to be a good fit for the team. I want you to really be comfortable in the lab, because mistakes happen when someone's under high pressure and they're really tense. I want them to be okay asking questions. I want them to be comfortable with their management. I want them to be comfortable with working and talking to their other people. So really that's the impression I'm trying to get from you. I just want to see what type of person you are and if you're going to be a good fit. And a lot of times just be honest in the interview. Have a conversation. At the end of the day, an interview is essentially a conversation. You're interviewing me as much as I'm interviewing you. You're deciding if you want to work for me, and I'm deciding if I want you to work for me. So it's a two-way street. It's not going to be exclusive to just me deciding if you're appropriate for this place. Just make sure you're comfortable. Don't take a job just because it's a job being offered to you. Make sure that you're asking me questions too. So one of the biggest things I like to see from someone who's actually gone in, researched just a little bit more, you're asking me questions about stuff that are going to be relevant to you. Don't just say, when I ask you if there's any questions, say, no, I'm okay. Or, how much does it pay? That should be a conversation that has once you're offered the job, perhaps, and you can have a secondary conversation around wage and things like that. The questions you should be asking is like, well, what is my daily tasks list going to be like that? Or can I see the lab? Or how long have people stayed in the role? Or who am I replacing somebody? What happened to the last person who did this role? What do you like about the job? Like, there's a million questions you can ask, but ask something. And I would say that's going to come in time. Not everyone interviews well, but practice makes perfect. The more interviews you go on, probably the better you're going to get at doing them.
Practice makes perfect. Okay. Want to say something?
Is there any last comment you might want to tell the graduate who's seeking out the job right now and the current students?
I would say they chose a really good degree. Like, honestly, I was torn between doing a chemistry degree and just doing a chemical technician. And if I had to go back and do it all over again, I probably would have just done a chem tech degree. Chemistry takes a lot longer, probably not as relevant in the industry these days. Chem tech teaches you more of the soft skills and hard skills that you need in an industry like this. And the fact that it's a 2-year degree, no one's going to frown on the fact that you have a 2-year degree. State grads are some of my favorite people to actually hire into the role, because I know they can work in the lab successfully, and generally the people who don't make it through the 2-year degree, whereas in chemistry it's very common that someone who couldn't hack it in an analytical lab will still get a chemistry degree. So it's a lot easier for me to tell that if you have the chem tech, you're probably going to be better in my lab than most people who have their bachelor's of chemistry. It's a rewarding career path. There's a lot of growth potential in the jobs as well, and there's a lot of companies like ours that have a really good track record for developing analysts and turning them into supervisors, managers, getting up into a higher level. If you look at our senior management team, you'll see actually our vice president of operations is actually someone who started as a lab tech C, working in the environmental lab about 13 years ago. So he graduated from school, came to work for us, took all the opportunities available. He's the vice president of the company in 13 years. So that's a pretty good track record. I started on a contract. I'm an operations manager after 8 years, 11 years. I've still been doing it pretty successfully. And there's a lot of people, there's a lot of stories like that at AGAT. Other companies generally do the same thing. A lot of people will start their jobs in the lab and they'll work their way up through the entire company. And if you show the right sort of dedication and desire to learn and continued drive towards moving up the company, I mean, the sky's the limit in a lot of cases. So I would just say, keep up with chemistry. Even if you're having a lot of bad luck getting into the industry itself, just try and get your foot in anywhere you can and just keep your skills sharp and just be yourself in an interview, and I think you'll do fine.
Okay, so thank you so much for your time and all of your answers. I think this will be very helpful, beneficial for the new graduate students. Yeah.
I hope it will.
No, thank you.
All right, thank you very much.